Hey, welcome to Dad Bod History. I'm Eric.
Jake.
And Cameron.
And I think tonight we're going to kind of do a pandemic to progress redux, kind of revisit that from the end of July to see where we are at right now. And I have some questions regarding some.
July feels like it was so long ago. You just said July, and I feel like that was 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, March was a long time ago.
I think March. I think Reagan was president in March. That's how long ago that feels.
I still have in my classroom March 13th on my little calendar. It's like these wooden blocks that I move. And I still have it as March 13th. And the kids are like, you ever going to change it? I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever want to. That was our last day we were in school. And we've been back, but it's not, I don't want to change it. I like to know that date.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I think I kind of want to talk about the pandemic and where we're at.
Okay.
Our pandemic chronicles are kind of talk about that a little bit and some things. But from the dad front.
Yes.
Jake.
I got one for you. It happened today, no less. So my wife wakes me up and she says she's going to go to the store this morning, like at 6:30, something like that, to go get groceries and then to get food for Thanksgiving. So I'm like, okay. So I went back to sleep because the kids were still asleep. And I woke up at about 7:40. My daughter wakes me up and she goes, hey, Dad, wake up. And I'm like, okay. So I wake up and I look at my phone and I see 16 missed phone calls. And I check my texts.
Only half were from me.
No, only half were from you. You and my wife are definitely my top two contacts on my favorites list. And basically the texts were about the same amount of text. So about 16 phone missed calls and about 16 missed texts. And it was, hey, answer your phone, like now, please, now. And long story short, my car, which she took, and I have a history of this, pushing the E on my gas tank as far as I possibly can before filling it up. So usually on Friday, it's very low and I'll go on Monday and fill it up. But if my wife takes my car in between Friday and Monday, she has to go fill up my gas tank. And she's told me this many, many times to stop doing that. And this time, my car ran out of gas on the way to the store. And so she had to go walk to the gas station, buy a gas can, fill it up, go fill up the car, go fill up the gas tank the rest of the way, and then go to the store. And by the time I woke up and called her back, she had done all those things. She had walked to the gas station, got the gas can, got the car started and filled up, and she was about to head to the store. And she was not happy with me. That is an understatement. Let's just leave it at that. But
should we have her on? Can we interview her about this?
Yeah, that'd be pretty entertaining.
Yeah. And she said afterwards, like, I called her, I'm like, I am so sorry. Like, there's no excuse I could possibly make. It was all on my head, and I accepted that and took the blame for that. But like, she was very magnanimous in her victory over me and in my chiding. So yeah.
So did you have to watch the Vikings loss today, or did you get to watch the Green Bay loss?
No, I got to watch the Green Bay loss. So that was part of my punishment, is that the Packers blew a great lead. So
and she just sat there watching you. I mean, yep.
Yeah.
It's all because of you.
No, but then she called her mom, and then they laughed at my expense. And like, so I'm sure there's a text chain going around with her friends too, but it's well deserved. Absolutely nothing I can ever say to possibly redeem myself on this one. So.
And it sounds like this is the kind of thing that is not going to be over today. Like, you're going to be hearing about this for a while.
Well, one of the great things about my wife is she has the greatest memory in all of mankind. So yes, it is something I'll tell you what, I once won an argument, and I've never forgotten that I once won an argument, but this blows that argument out of the water. Like I won because like we were disagreeing on paint color for an accent wall, and my choice was better, and she finally acknowledged that. But me leaving the car so empty, she has to go walk to the gas station, kind of wipes out that. So any future wins I have are already negated by this one. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a gift that keeps on giving.
yeah,
Right
no,
there.
I'm gonna be paying this debt off for years.
And I'm trying to put myself in your shoes there, like, because there were 4 or 5 things that went wrong, that didn't go your way there to kind of pile on.
Yeah.
The fact that you slept, she's told you 100 times, the fact that you slept in, the fact that all of that amount of time went by before you finally called her back.
Yeah.
Are you just piling on at this point, Cameron? I mean,
well, I'm just trying to say, what else could have gone wrong there? Could it have been worse? And I'm thinking that, if I were in your position, Jake, would I have just waited till she came back and not picked up the phone? I think that could have made it worse. I think that was one thing that you did is you just
well, said, lucky hey, me.
I'm good. Sorry. Well, I'm trying to find a silver lining here.
No, I mean you're probably right. That probably is the very small, microscopic silver lining. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my story from the dad front for this week. We bought a house this week, but that's like a side note after my screw up this Sunday. So anyway.
Good.
But otherwise, it was a great weekend. Good weekend. Kids had a good time. We all had a nice, relaxing weekend. Good week overall. How about you guys?
Yeah, nothing special. Just played in the kids played in the street and I washed the car, rode around their bikes with the neighborhood kids. It's pretty simple. My kids are simple, so entertaining them is not very hard. We take a morning walk and it pretty much blew their mind that instead of our neighborhood, we went across the street to the other neighborhood and their park was just amazing and they just raved about it all day. So that was definitely a dad win.
Nice.
Eric, what you got?
I mean, I was resting a lot of this weekend. We've got this next week off. So it was kind of a weird week. I spent a lot of time just sitting on the couch and I felt weird about that, but
it just got you ready for this whole week of you sitting on the couch.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had to prepare,
so
but
it was like training camp.
Yeah. I've got, I had the kids battling, the 2 older ones want to do certain things that don't really include the younger one. And that's tough for him. But, then we turn on, they'll watch something like they really enjoy the Trolls movie. Right. So you turn on the music and they all just bust out dancing. And the young one wants to sit there. I guess there's a character that has a beanie pulled down like over his eyes and then he drums and hits his head on the drum. So he grabbed all these pillows and he got 2 things for drumsticks. We started playing the song and he pulls the beanie down right here and he just starts drumming and then he'll stop and he'll hit his head on the middle pillow and then he'll keep drumming. And it's just hilarious. And then he gets mad at the other 2 because they finish the game. They're done playing. And he'll say, brother and sissy won't let me rock out. And I'm like, no, they're not stopping you. What you mean is they're not rocking out with you. And so he's trying to coax them into like playing air guitar and all this kind of stuff. So it was pretty cute. But again, I think my 2 oldest, they're 9 and 7. And the youngest is 3. And so there's that kind of gap where he's not ready to do the things that they really want to do. And it's a little bit frustrating sometimes, but
sure.
So
really he just needs to go solo, break the band up and start his own career.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a solo drummer would be the way to go.
I was just going to say that.
There's not enough.
Sounds like he's got skills. I mean,
there's not enough solo drummers out there. It's all rhythm. That's all that matters.
I think he could do it. But then we were also like Christmas shopping and trying to, via Amazon, just trying to figure out what is it that we're gonna do for Christmas type stuff. And that's a whole other thing, right? It's just trying to get things that are going to be worthwhile and valued, but also not to the point that they spoil anyone. So I think that's tricky. Trying to find that sweet spot with gifts for kids.
Yeah, for sure. We
Because
struggle with that every year, man.
to buy a bunch of stuff. And my issue there is we buy a ton of little gifts, but then half of them are gone by the end of the week, or they're no longer interested. Or we spend a large chunk on one big gift, gambling that it's going to be something they really appreciate and really spend a lot of time with. And it's tricky because it's like, do you get something that's durable item that they can play with over and over and over and over and over, or do something with, or do you get something that's I guess what's the other a consumable thing. And I feel like I want to lean towards consumable things. Like, here's this thing, you get to do it, you get to experience it, enjoy it, and then after that it's gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yes, because every year after Christmas,
That's exactly it.
So much stuff.
Yeah.
And I just have to I can't wait to get rid of it. And we've been doing experience things more and more in the last couple of years because we're desperate. I'm desperate to just clear this house out.
Yeah.
50% of, there's a stat out there that I'm making up right now that 50% of stuff in your house could be thrown away and you'd never miss it, ever.
Exactly.
I love the made up stats because those are the ones that suit my lifestyle the best. So I'm
According to
camera.
My sources here say it's 54%. So you're close.
Yeah.
Beg your pardon. But those are clearly the best kind of stats for sure.
Yeah.
I'm a treasure trove of those kind.
Speaking of gifts, one of my coworkers got me a gift. He had texted me a few weeks ago. He says, "What do you think of these?" I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And then we're at school the other day, and he shows up and he tosses this to me. And I'm like, "You got this?" I'm like, "That's cool." So then I wore it to school the next day. It's a General Patton hoodie. It's got like Third Army and his service stripes and all his medals. So I wore that to school the next day. And as you may know, I do have, I believe it's Korean War era, but it's the same style helmet that they wore during World War II. So I wore some khaki pants, and I threw that helmet on. Kids didn't know what to think. It was great. It was absolutely fantastic.
I think the U.S. Army should go to the hoodie style fatigues.
Why not?
Standard. It's far more comfortable. And that pocket in the front, I mean, that's, yeah.
Yeah, usually they have to wear like a whole bunch of extra stuff for those pockets.
Yeah,
they're built in.
If it's funny, those hoodies, I've seen those before. I've seen the Patton one, and they have all sorts of different ones. Like they have
Washington, Hamilton.
Washington, but then they have like Middle Ages, like it looks like a suit
Knights
of mail.
Templar.
Yeah, those are really interesting. My wife wanted to get
Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, definitely. That's the one I was really pining for, but she said no.
I did, because I was searching for it, and I saw an article that they were kind of gave the company that came up with that originally like a scathing review, because they also had like, Andrew Jackson, who has a iffy record on some human rights. Who else did they have? Hermann Goring, one of the Nazis. I'm like, yeah, I probably wouldn't get that hoodie. Even if you take the swastikas off of it, it's still like, do you really want to wear his? But then there's a question of how long do you let go by before you can wear the historical hoodie of somebody who is responsible for the deaths of hundreds or thousands of people. I don't know what the time we're allowed to give is.
Any
Over under
general,
on that.
pretty much any general is going to fall into that camp. Patton. I mean, but we're okay with Patton because he won. So, right?
Well, yeah,
Two-time World War
but I
champion.
don't think Patton. I don't think
Yeah.
Patton like wholesale slaughtered villages of Germans.
No, but your first stipulation was responsible for the deaths of hundreds or thousands of people. So Patton would definitely fall into that camp.
Oh, I
Attila the
guess I
Hun,
meant
another one of our bar fight
Innocent.
fives. If we had an Attila the Hun hoodie, is that appropriate?
Well, again, like, are we far enough removed where we can be like, yeah, I'm dressed as Attila, or is that cultural appropriation for whoever is still a Hun, and B, are we far enough removed that it's okay to wear a hoodie from Attila the Hun's days or Genghis Khan's days?
Sure.
Probably
I
not
think
Hermann
it's
Goring.
proportional to the number of deaths that you're responsible for. So Genghis Khan, there's got to be more time that goes by than Attila the Hun.
That's a fair. Yeah, maybe there's a sliding scale, like Cameron's saying.
So I sent that. I sent that
Patton,
graphic
I
to
think
you.
we're good.
I don't care if. No, I mean, yeah, Patton, we're good. I'm just gonna say that. Like, I'm not gonna give it some qualifications. Like, I don't think he. Anyways, I sent that graphic to you of like events in history and the number of deaths caused. Did I ever send that to you?
I don't think so. Or if
I
don't have it.
I think I did. You probably ignored it. And like the most horrific, like
Jeez, that was condescending.
I ignore myself all the time. Because
passive aggressive.
I think I had like 10 or 15 texts and they didn't get responded to. I assume people just see it and they're like, I get to that
here
later.
we go.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm okay.
Oh man. Okay.
Is that going to be next episode where Eric whines at us?
Yeah,
I'm
are we gonna
doing
do
that right
Festivus
now.
and the airing of grievances? And another thing.
I find that to be a recurring phrase we're getting here. Anyways, so I do think that, the sliding scale. But I don't know. Okay.
I mean, I guess the real test is if you wear it out in public and people shame you, then it's probably not, we're not ready yet.
Yeah. I don't think I'm wearing a Patton. I don't think I'm going to wear one of these type of hoodies out and about because it's just kind of odd.
So you're just going to,
But in a classroom full of,
nerd.
No, it'll be just, I think it'll just be for school. And I want to be that teacher. Like, I think I can go with the George Washington one and get a powdered wig and a tricorn hat. I think that'd look okay.
I think you already are that teacher, Eric.
Yeah, but I don't have all of these yet.
That teacher, you're already there.
He's telling us what he wants for Christmas. He's giving us his Christmas list.
There it is, folks. Put that in the comments below after you like and subscribe. That's what I really want for Christmas, those likes and subsubscribes.
You're only going to get war criminal sweatshirts. You're only going to get the worst of the worst.
And only wear those at home, Eric.
The Pol Pot hoodie. Yeah. Edie Amin. It's just going to be all the worst of the worst. So there you go.
Nice.
You'd think the Stalin one would come with a mustache.
Oh, it would almost have to. And
for sure.
And on the American side, one would hope the Teddy one came with a mustache and spectacles.
Yeah. Oh, so the Teddy one, if I get the Rough Rider hat. So I do have a few of these that I'm like, if I get this, I have to get this accessory. Otherwise, it kind of doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And like George Washington, need the powdered wig and the tricorn hat. I don't think I need much for the Hamilton one, except for just like a wig to pull back. Money. Teddy Roosevelt need the Rough Rider hat and a mustache.
Why do you need to get a mustache? Why can't you just have a mustache?
Excellent question.
just curious.
Too soon, man. Too soon.
Struck a chord there.
I'm just the people want to know. So
39. Actually.
okay.
Okay. I shaved today. Had I not, or yesterday, you might have seen a little shade here.
Okay.
Oh, you know what I did? Here's something I did last week. Have you ever been to a barber?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I went to a
Oh,
barber.
no.
I have not.
Tell me about this barber.
I don't know. It's here in town. It was referred to me, and it was the first time I've gone to a legit barber, right? I've gone to like Great Clips and over the past 7 months, my wife has kind of taken care of my hair, but I said, I want to try a barber out because I really need to get cleaned up. And she said, go for it. I think I went illegally because of the governor's orders here in California.
After 10 o'clock or what?
No, because they had closed. They were supposed to have closed all these places.
Mm.
But I think different counties, sheriffs and police are just like, we're not enforcing half this stuff. We're just not. But yeah, like it was, trimmed everything up with the straight blade, the straight razor on all the edges. Like, I don't know, I walked out of there feeling like that was worth it. It was
Felt like a dapper man.
I did feel dapper. Yeah. So that was nice.
That's a good thing that we all need to break into, is just that barber type lifestyle. You get classy dad points immediately by making a habit out of that. Your cigar, whiskey, and all of those things just rolled into one. Your wife starts to get on board with that a little bit more. I could see you pushing that, really pulling that off over the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
I liked it. A couple of years ago, I went to the barber a few times, and it was awesome. I mean, the haircuts were great, but it's like, man, this is expensive. Like for something that I can do at home, not as well, but something that I can do at home. But it is a nice experience. Like it's a treat to go to a barber and have them do your hair and give you a shave. My Uncle Mike told me he would do that. He'd go to the barber once a week and he would get like the old fashioned shave with the leather strap and the straight razor. And he said it was one of the most relaxing experiences that he would have. It was like his way to decompress.
Let me ask you, was the conversation, was it sports related? Was it typical barbershop conversation, or what? How did that go? Was the guy kind of quiet, just did his thing?
Mine?
Yeah.
It was quiet. So I gone on a recommendation. I didn't know what I was getting into. I made an appointment, so it was a little bit more expensive. I walked in and they're like, do you have an appointment? I'm like, I do. I don't know who it's with, because it kind of set me up. And one of the guys like, are you Eric? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you're with me next. Here, take this buzzer. You got to go outside. And it was very Spanish themed, I think, Mexican themed barbershop, especially with the art all on the inside. It was very nice. And I guess they're going to do a remodel to kind of like make sure everything's open enough and enough space for all of the just all the COVID regulations. But they had some TVs on, and he kind of chatted with me a little bit. I had the mask on and he's getting around the edges. I said, do you want me to take the mask off? He says, yeah, you can do that. He says, I don't want to tell people to take it off because some people get offended. I'm like, I'm not going to get offended. I'm okay with breathing. And we chatted a little bit, not a lot. He wasn't a talker. But there was kind of that relaxed vibe in there. All the barbers kind of chatting back and forth, and some of the people talking, some not. But I was done. I looked at it. I'm like, yeah, this is great. And told him I'd be back because it was nice. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I ought to try that sometime.
Yeah. Next time we're all in town together, let's all go to the barber.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds like a great
idea.
stud party idea.
Yes. What'd you guys do? Got a nice shave and a haircut.
I just got a haircut.
Okay, just Eric got it. Yeah.
Eric saved $7. No, I could let it. I could let it grow out if I knew it was happening. Let it grow out enough to where I could be like, "Yeah,
You
can you
could.
go ahead and shave it?" They're like, "We're not going to charge you extra for that." I'm like, "Can you just please take my money and shave my face?"
Charge me. I want to be part of the experience.
It's like, okay.
I
I'm like,
love
did
it.
you even use a razor? No, I just wiped the cream off your face.
All right. All right. Well, do you want to get into the actual topic, or you just want to keep
Sure.
rolling?
Yeah, let's get into this.
Okay.
So I have this question in my head. It's kind of been going. We talked about the pandemic back in July. We said that feels like forever ago, and we talked about pandemic to progress in terms of, when these pandemics happen, there's shifts in society that we make progress in. And so there's been a number of things I've been reading. What's interesting is we're very stuck in this country right now, in all this election nonsense. And it looks like tonight, that Sidney Powell, like her whole thing is just the wheels are coming off. Whatever the Kraken was, whatever any of this conspiracy was, looks like it's going up in smoke real fast. Even Trump is like distancing himself from her, and her legal team, and saying, okay, she doesn't work for our organization campaign. But we're stuck looking at that when we do have some problems coming up. A lot of these CARES Act benefits are expiring at the end of next month, the end of December, and there doesn't seem to be much of a plan to fix anything or to change anything. But tied in with all of that is some of the stuff that's been coming out of like the World Economic Forum. And I was reading something today about the guarantee, should jobs be guaranteed? Things like the Second Bill of Rights, which is something that came from FDR, which included like, actually, let me go find it because I had it here. So there's something that was posted by Kyle Kalinske, and it had FDR, Second Bill of Rights. Every American has the right to a job, an adequate wage and decent living, decent home, medical care, economic protection during sickness, accident, old age, or unemployment, and a good education. And and then we have this thing coming out of the World Economic Forum, which is basically called the Great Reset. Basically seeing that if maybe we're to a point in human history where we need to have another big shift in how things get done. And to the point where, hey, maybe you don't need to own anything. You can still be happy. Maybe some of the rights that were guaranteed in the United States are not necessary in order for us to be happy and fulfilled and all these things. So I guess my question is, how do you feel about something like that? Because that kind of goes beyond making progress through a pandemic and goes into designing a new system that's built to withstand something like a pandemic. What do you think?
My first question, and I've never heard of this Second Bill of Rights. I literally Googled it as you were talking about it. And my first question is, who's going to provide all of these things? When you talk about employment guaranteed, farmers' rights to a fair income, freedom from monopolies, housing, medical care, Social Security, who's going to provide that? The government?
Yeah,
which is really well known for providing social services now. That just doesn't smell right. Yeah,
and so I did challenge this mostly on the fact that I saw it and I said, hey, you can pursue these rights. Like nobody is preventing you from getting these things. I don't think anyone should be prevented from getting these things. And but the people there challenged me, and they challenged me really well. Some people challenged me really well, and I've had to kind of like, pivot a little bit, and the discussions have basically been, point for point, kind of taking jabs and adjusting, but none of it, or any of the stuff that's been disrespectful in any way, I just ignored, because there were some people who had some really good points and questions, and I kind of wanted to work with those. But yeah, it would be government that provides all those things. And apart from the efficiency and competency of government, there comes a question of modern monetary theory, which is something that I don't know if I fully grasp. But it basically comes down to the government can never run out of money because they print it. And
why is that a good
Ramsey
thing?
is not a fan of that, I'm sure. But
right, why is that being pushed, or why do people like that? That's a real question.
I don't know if it's I'm sure there are people that like it, but it sure does seem to be the situation we find ourselves in, is that basically the Fed can just continue to give unlimited loans to the United States government, and then they can continue to spend that however they want. And there is nothing backing our currency. There is no gold in Fort Knox that we can tie to our dollar. So, and the same thing that happened with Greece several years ago when they were debating Brexit. And a big part of it was the IMF was saying, well, can we just give them a loan and then they have to do austerity measures? But they were basically, in a sense, creating money out of nothing to give to Greece so that they remain solvent. So in a sense, that seems to be the way our world economy is trending, is it's all fiat currency. There is no hard currency tying the dollar to anything other than the government says it's worth $1. Whether that's good or bad is a different question, but
how long has it been since that's been the case?
We did. I think we went off the gold standard in the early 1900s, or did we go off the silver standard? Eric, do you remember? I think we went off the gold standard in the early 1900s, and we went off the silver standard like in the Nixon administration. So we haven't had a hard currency, like a metal, a valuable metal tied to our currency since at least the 60s.
Huh.
And so if I understand it correctly, because someone posted the question, because I mentioned taxes, I said, if you're going to give something to somebody else, when you say something's a right, there's two kinds of rights. There's negative rights and positive rights. And negative rights basically say, you can't prevent me from engaging in this thing. I have this right and you can't stop me. That's a negative right. A positive right, so a negative right means I get to do this thing, and you're not allowed to prevent me from doing that thing. And so that's what most of the rights detailed in kind of the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights it's like, you get to speak. Nobody gets to stop you from speaking. You get to bear arms. Nobody gets to infringe upon that. There's some rights in there that provide provision from others. So that's what a positive right is you have a right to this thing. And usually when they say that, so you have a right to healthcare, what they mean is you have a right to it, not only to get it, because right now we have a right to go buy healthcare as much as we want and buy those services, but you have a right to it in that you get to have that thing and it will be provided from you. Now, that requires that that's provided by others, right, through the government. And so in my kind of exploration of the topic with some of these people on Twitter, again, a lot of them were very respectful and brought up a lot of good points, is that our taxes aren't actually funding these things. Our taxes don't fund at the federal level any of these things. Our taxes fund the debt. They basically say they uphold the debt. Regardless of how big the debt is, the taxes we pay simply guarantee that the debt can be paid. And that's kind of my understanding of modern monetary theory, is that we can't stop paying the taxes because we do have to say this is backed. The dollar is backed by the taxes that everyone pays every year. And I probably miffed that up a bit. But that's a positive right, meaning, so we're going to provide healthcare to everybody, but that has to be paid for through the debt that's guaranteed by our taxes. So it comes from somebody else. A positive right would also be, the negative right is you have the right to bear arms. The positive right is we're also going to provide you a gun, which, hey, I'm totally fine with, by the way. But that has to be, somebody has to make that gun. Somebody has to pay for that gun and the ammunition. And so I was trying to say the second Bill of Rights is really, those are all positive rights, which require other people to pitch in and pay for. And that's where I run into an issue, because once you start requiring people to provide something else to someone else, you're removing their negative rights.
How so?
In what way? What? How so?
Well, you said in order to guarantee the positive rights, right? Getting people to pay for that, you're removing people's negative rights. So my question is, how so?
Well, so it's kind of like I guess it'd be a slow creep. We already pay taxes, right? So that is what it is. I know there's a ton of gray area here too. I guess the how so would be that if the government is going to pay for everyone's health care, a couple things are going to happen. You're going to remove the right of doctors to operate, especially if you're going to single payer, for doctors to operate in the market they choose. Right? If a doctor says, I don't want to participate in the market that only pays this much for my services, I want to make this much, that right has been removed from them, because with medical care being provided single payer by the government sets the prices. And by setting the prices, they're removing all of healthcare from a free market, which we'd say, hey, it's your right to operate in the market you choose. So that'd be one example, if I explained that correctly or sufficiently.
Okay. It's interesting because I think you're bringing up when you look at the second Bill of Rights, for example, so those positive rights, as they say. And as you were talking, I looked up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically, the second Bill of Rights covers your physiological and safety needs. So your physiological: food, water, warmth, rest, security, and safety, right?
Right.
And then everything beyond that: intimate relationships, friends, prestige, self-actualization. Those are all things beyond the first two tiers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So people that are for that are basically saying, well, let's cover the basics at some basic level. So let's guarantee people have food on the table, or a roof over their head, right? And then beyond that, I guess it'd be, you could pursue a nicer home. Me and my wife, we just bought a home for our move. Or you can get different kinds of food, or food beyond what the government would provide, or the social net, however you want to describe it, would provide. Am I kind of at least paralleling those?
Yeah, and I've come to that semi-conclusion before, in that, in weighing the benefits of freedom, I guess. And like, how can somebody be the most free? And I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I say, in order for somebody to be completely, I see it and I think, I kind of get the idea that if we can provide some of those things and guarantee that those things can see, there's a difference between guarantee those things can be provided and guarantee that they can be available, right? Then people can reach higher levels of freedom. Like you can't really, if you're going to be completely free, then you are solely responsible for those bottom levels, right?
Mhm.
And I get that. I think some people I think there's a lot of people that are fully capable of providing all those things for themselves. But there's a point at which I feel like it does break down and say, if we can provide those things, can people be more free? What we run into the issue, or where I start running into it in my head, is let's say we provide those things. Now people are able to, and I don't have the hierarchy of needs, but you get to those top tiers where it's like self-actualization,
Actualization.
right? And
Yeah.
self-expression. It's like, okay, but what happens when self-expression, which I think most Americans are fully capable of, there's quite a few Americans who are in a situation where they can't even reach that level because, they are in a certain level of poverty, or at least perceived poverty, where they are going hungry. I get that happens. And we can address that. Where in my self-actualization, I start to express myself and I see that maybe the system that the government is set up to provide all these things is corrupt, and I want to call it out, or my ability to do that might be for the benefit of society reined in. So do you kind of understand what, like, as people reach that higher level, they might start to criticize how that bottom level is provided. And then we say, well, you can't get there anymore. You can't get to the top level anymore. That's problematic for our larger system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see the conflict there.
And so there's, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can see the conflict there, but I think when we look at specifically things like education and healthcare, and I see those more in a light of, is the current system working? And if we replaced it with this system, would it be better, worse, or the same? And I think in some cases, especially when it comes to higher education, so specifically post high school, and the system that we have is technically working. However, it's wildly expensive. And I know we discussed this on a previous episode, Eric. The way it's funded right now,
are you talking education?
Funded education, where it's funded through state and local taxes, right, to state universities. But then it's also funded through government-backed loans and or tuition that you pay out of pocket. And so if you're going to pay state taxes to have these public universities, that's fine. But then I don't want to also have to pay for it again when I actually send my kid to college via loan or straight up paying tuition out of pocket. Mm-hmm. And so a system like many of the countries in Europe that they have, where state universities are essentially free to go to as far as tuition goes, because they decided this is something we're going to pay for through our taxes and we're going to fund it fully. Now you can still go to private universities and pay tuition to go to those private universities that are there, but the state colleges in England, there is no tuition, or it's very, very, very low. Whereas the system we have, essentially I'm paying twice to go to college. And I think that's an unfair system. And so I would say either stop funding schools through taxes, or make sure they're funded enough that we also don't have to pay $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year in tuition. Because right now I think we kind of have the worst of both worlds.
Well, yeah, well, it's not even just, yes, you're double dipping, but you're kind of triple dipping, because in many cases, you're not going to pay tuition. You're going to get a student loan, and you aren't going to understand exactly how much you're spending from money that really has never gone into your hands. You've never held it before it gets paid.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a year after you graduate, they're like, oh, here's how much you owe. Here's the interest, and here's how much it'll be a month. For the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, if your degree was not valuable, you're kind of stuck. So you're paying, I'd say you're paying kind of triple.
Yeah.
But when it comes to something like healthcare, and I kind of made this point in one of the discussions, I think, was that, listen, we have a very mixed system. There's a massive amount of government intervention. The government's paying a ton of money into our healthcare system as it is. And you have insurance companies, and you have mandates, you had mandates at least, where you had to buy health insurance, and all the premiums went up because they had to cover this. And so you've got this kind of mishmash of what the insurance companies wanted in the Affordable Care Act, what the government wanted in it, what people didn't want in it. And it was just kind of rammed through. And now we have it and we're stuck with it. And of course, it's more expensive for everyone. So would a single payer system that was streamlined be more, would I find it more beneficial than what we have right now? Maybe. Because my premiums only ever go up. And my
Yeah.
coverage only ever gets stricter. And I know that if we had an absolutely free market, there would be some abuse there. But and if I could buy a plan that was out of some other state that covered me better, if I had like a full option, here's 100 different plans, pick the one that you can afford and that works for you. I mean, thankfully, my employer, we get two options for our coverage. And they're two different kinds of options, and there's benefits to both, and there's different costs to both. And, it's tricky. And more options is not always better, but it does tend to drive down the price.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really good conversation a little while ago with a good friend, and not necessarily specifically about second Bill of Rights or anything like that, but more just how people view the world. And, as we're having this conversation, it just, what I keep thinking is about opportunity cost, and about, if we give this up, be it a right or a positive right or a negative right, what does that cost on the back end? Now you can talk about that. Your time. If I'm going to work out, I'm losing the opportunity to sit and watch the ball game that I want to watch. And if I sit down and watch the ball game, I'm losing out on the opportunity to work out. On some of these things that, if the government were to, if we go to a single payer system, or if the government would take that over in some case to make a minimum standard of living, what are we giving up to do that? I think that's a big part of this conversation, is how far are we willing to go until we draw the line. Obviously that number is different, or that distance is different for everybody. But when we start talking about socialized medicine or single payer system or whatever, okay, then that begs the question, what are we going to do with housing? What are we going to do with education? Because I think all of those things are kind of looped in together, and it's very dangerous to go down that road without addressing all. If you do one at a time, well, this one, and that line is going to keep creeping toward government control.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it starts with a conversation of who's responsible for providing these things. And if the answer to that question is government, then things are going to really change in this country, given, you know, the second Bill of Rights. But if that goes back to individuals, then I would say that that's what was meant, how it was meant to be, you know, and when this country was founded and the way that things operate right now. You know, our country's not perfect, obviously, but that second Bill of Rights is pretty drastic to me as I'm reading through these and as we're just having these conversations. I think it's a very slow.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And I think it's interesting, right? Because when we talk about capitalism, you know, and capitalism revolutionized the Middle Ages and it revolutionized the standard of living for all of Europe after the Black Death. And that's where capitalism really took off because people now had capital, they had money, and they could go buy the finer things in life. And it wasn't just a rich man's game anymore. And so when people talk about, rightly so, that capitalism has created more wealth throughout the world and has brought more people out of poverty than anything else, I think that's true. But I also think at the same time, the economic system that we have in America is not capitalistic anymore. It's corporate, you know, it's a corporatism. And I know it's something, Eric, that you've brought up a couple of times. And it's not something that benefits the people in the way that it used to. You know, during this pandemic, Jeff Bezos made like another $1 trillion. Amazon made another $1 trillion during a pandemic. And it doesn't actually help. I mean, I guess it helps him and it helps the people that work at Amazon, but it doesn't like help America at large. And so corporations have now found a way to monopolize the engine of capitalism to benefit themselves without necessarily benefiting the citizens of the country at large. And so I think the appeal of something like this is that it's basically takes that money out of the corporate's hands and in a sense tries to redistribute it. I mean, that's what it is. It's redistributing that wealth to people. Now, whether or not that's better than the system we have, I don't know, but I can see the appeal because people, right, when people are lobbying for this, are saying, well, look at all the corporations and how much money they have and, you know, all their super yachts and all that stuff. And I think that's the appeal. But again, that doesn't mean this is a better system. This second Bill of Rights would be better, but it is calling out a glaring imbalance, I think, in our country as it sits right now. You know, and so maybe that's the point I'm trying to make is that while it might not be right, it is pointing to something that's wrong with how we function right now.
Yeah, and I guess there's more than one way to go about it. You know, redistribution of wealth is one way, and then, you know, making a move back toward pure, because, you know, it's almost impossible to have it pure. And I don't think I'm a fan of absolute capitalism. But yeah, you know, you can go really two ways with that, and I don't think the second Bill of Rights way is the right way to do it.
Sure. Well, and before FDR, Teddy Roosevelt had the Square Deal, right? So before the New Deal was the Square Deal, and the Square Deal is basically making people, and specifically corporations, play fairly. And so it wasn't a matter of we guarantee healthcare, we guarantee these things, but we make sure that you aren't engaging in monopolies and you aren't, you know, that's when a lot of the first labor laws came into, you know, protecting the worker, so to speak. You know, and so I think you can move towards where people like have the opportunity to buy health insurance without going the socialized route.
Yeah. I just think that you two are more responsible with me and your opinions, because I have, I'm super opinionated and I want to say, no, this is wrong, and beat my fist on the table. But yeah, I mean, I think it is a conversation worth having, because again, it's where do you want to draw that line in the sand? Do you want to draw it, giving up a little bit more rights of the average citizen so that the government can take control? And again, it's a very simplistic look at it. Or do you want to your point, Jake, to kind of make it a square deal situation so that corporations can't cheat and monopolize?
Well, and here's a good example of that, Cameron and Eric, is in the 40s. The reason we have the health insurance system we have today is because in the 40s, Franklin Roosevelt put a wage freeze during the war, because he didn't want a bunch of inflation during the war effort, because to make sure he could afford things. So he said, you can't pay workers more than this. And so the company said, well, we can get around this by offering them health insurance as a benefit.
That's
And
right.
so
Mhm.
the way they entice people to work for companies is say, well, we'll give you health insurance if you come work for us. So technically it wasn't a wage increase, but it was a wage increase. And so the reason we have government or is employer provided health insurance is because the government tried to control wages. And that led to this weird janky system we have today. Whereas if they didn't do that, yes, there was a risk of inflation, but then workers would have just been compensated more. And so they would have been allowed to purchase their own insurance through whatever systems were available at the time. And so it would have been a more capitalistic system for healthcare.
But see where that broke down, Jake, was government intervention. That's
what I'm saying.
Step one. That was the first domino of all of that happening. The government overstepped their bounds, and now look, everything. They caused the pandemic. There you go. Back in the 40s.
Well, I don't know about that, but
there's a series of pandemics since then.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making, is that, and you picked right up on it, is that because FDR exerted control over wages, it led to all these unintended consequences we have now. Now, there is an argument to be made that if he didn't do that, we may have adopted a socialized medicine system in the 40s or 50s, like most European countries did after the war. But we might not have, but either way, it wouldn't have set up this weird hybrid government, corporate, capitalist health insurance system we have now. It's not truly capitalist. It's not truly socialist. It's some mishmash of both that I don't know if either serves us super well. Because I would much rather have my boss, not have to provide my health insurance and give me a big old raise.
Yeah.
In lieu of that. I mean, if the option was I can go purchase my own healthcare and I get a big raise, that would be awesome to me.
Right.
But
so let me ask this, because I don't think we're going to get to all those things, and we haven't really even talked about, I guess, the great reset part of this whole thing is, just again shifting our economics and society to better reflect kind of where humanity is at right now. Although I would argue humanity is the same today as we were yesterday and 2,000 years ago. I mean, human nature is human nature. And I think the profit motive is important at an individual level. I think it gets dangerous, just like everything else, when you get to the corporate level, because the profit motive, when you get to a board of directors, and they say, well, we're responsible to shareholders, and so we have to make the decision that brings us profit, even if it's an unethical or immoral one. And I think most corporations don't purposefully make a decision that's unethical or immoral. But I think they can easily slide into it when you're voting, when you have 50 board members voting, we're gonna move in this direction because that's what gets us the profit. And none of them are thinking this is immoral or unethical. They're saying this is kind of how things have to be, right? So I've had people tell me that corporations are immoral, and I'd say, no, they're amoral, which has its own problems, because if it's amoral, then it cannot rest on a moral system and say, by making this decision, we're doing something that's wrong. What they can rest on is, based on the bylaws and what we're supposed to do to bring profit, we have to make a decision that's going to hurt a lot of people, but we're serving the stockholders, right? So, and I'm not sure where that train of thought was going again, but here it is. I get so far down the road that I forget where I'm headed. So again, that profit motive, I think it's helpful for people to engage in things that they want to do in order to do their very best, and they drive to get better so that they can gain more out of it. You want more value out of the work you put in, right? Like I wouldn't do a job that paid me less than the work was actually worth to me. On the other hand, when you get up to those levels, it can be corruptible, right? So the question of that first thing on FDR's list, which was a job, guaranteeing a job. And so I read an article that somebody posted. They said, read this. I said, I would. And I read a lot of it. And a lot of it got into that modern monetary theory. And it kind of came to the point where it said, if the private sector cannot reduce unemployment to under 2%, then the government is fully capable of employing those unemployed people. And it came to the point where the government is already, and that is people who want to work but can't find a job. The government's already providing unemployment benefits to people. And if it can print its own money, it could do so. And so, again, I struggle with that. But then I look at it and say, well, is there a way to do that has a return on investment, right? And so someone tweeted back to me, and I haven't got back to it, where they said, the fiscal responsibility here is that if the government's going to put money into jobs, those jobs have to then have a return on investment that make it worth it. And so that comes to things like infrastructure. So how would you feel if the government spent, throw a number out there, on infrastructure, and then was then giving jobs to people who were otherwise unemployed? Is there a benefit to that? Is that something that
Well,
first of all, are these rhetorical questions? Because
well, I mean, I'm trying.
What's the trick, Hoffman?
Not everybody, not every person wants a job. I think it's ridiculous that we could get unemployment down to 2%. I think that number is possible to get that low, as far as people that are capable and willing to work. And the fact that that only works on paper. I think it's pie in the sky to say, we could get that down to 2%, because not everybody wants a job. Not everybody wants to contribute. They'd rather just have that money handed to them. Well, and I like what you said earlier, Eric, too, is this modern monetary theory kind of assumes that human nature has changed, and it really hasn't. We all need that feeling of worth, and we all need that feeling of being proud of what we've produced, and being incentivized to work.
Well, I don't think it's modern monetary theory that has seen human nature's change. I think that's kind of part of I'd say kind of socialist and communist Marxist theory, is that if you take the profit motive away, people will act well. And it's like, well, No, I don't think they will. I think human nature is, we have 6,000 years of literature on human nature. We have it pinned down pretty well. But if the government said, listen, we're going to spend this much money and we're going to I don't know, fill all the potholes in the interstate system. So we're going to employ people to do that. Who needs a job and who wants to do this? We'll pay this. Rather than paying you just unemployment benefits and saying we're going to pay you because you're unemployed. If you've come to get benefits or you've filed at the unemployment office, the government will give you some work and have you go do something. My thinking is, if the government's spending money anyways on your unemployment benefits, God knows we have enough money to drop bombs on the desert of the Middle East. So why not spend it on infrastructure that could also provide jobs? And I don't say that to say I'm necessarily in favor of that. I'm just saying, why isn't this a better way of going about it?
Well, I don't know. I think it would be interesting. And here's, when we were talking about this a while ago, back in July, I guess, and you mentioned, with the pandemic, and we were talking about the national response to the pandemic versus the states responding to the pandemic. I think this would be a great opportunity for certain states to adopt this and just see how would it work, because I know there's some communities in Europe that are experimenting with universal basic income in small, and seeing, does it work? Will people stop working? That, I think this would be another one of those opportunities to do it. I do think it's interesting though, although maybe being the government, you could just tell people whatever job, if you want the money, you're going to do the job we give you. But I don't know if everyone would be able to go fill in potholes. I know certainly I would not want to do that in Phoenix in the summer, but
in Wisconsin in the winter.
I didn't have it. Oh, definitely.
Because the government, that's how they do it, right?
Yeah. Go fill potholes in the Wisconsin winter. Okay. Can I shovel it first? No, we're going to pay you to fill the pothole, not shovel the snow.
That's a whole other department. They come in June.
Yeah. Sorry. But here's something that I've thought when it comes to unemployment benefits. I think a big part of the disconnect that people see is, well, if I get unemployment, I'm getting paid not to work. And in some cases, people are getting paid more not to work than if they did have a job, which maybe tells you about wages in certain industries and stuff like that. But I think, well, what if instead of, once you get a job, the unemployment ends? What if once you get a job, the unemployment reduces? So you can still get that supplement, but you're also still working. And if you get a raise, then it reduces a little bit more. And if you start making more money, then slowly the unemployment gets weaned down. Or I guess it would be employment assistance. It wouldn't be unemployment anymore. But it gets weaned down until eventually, you're working and you're able to support yourself fully without need from the government. To me, I feel like that's a better incentive than just paying people to do infrastructure. Unless the government's hiring construction companies, which I think is a great way to use government. If they're actually hiring companies to say, go do this infrastructure work, then that's different, as opposed to just paying unemployed Jake to go fill potholes in the middle of winter in Wisconsin. I think it's a terrible use of money, and I would never want to be part of that. But does that make sense? The way I'm describing that other.
Yeah. As your wages increase, the benefits
assistance
decrease
goes
until
down.
you get to a certain point. But I think one of the issues with universal basic income, one of them, and again, I've looked at it here and there, and I think as we approach this level where there's so much automation, that I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think with all of this automation, we're actually beginning to, as a whole, automation can start filling in those bottom tiers for an entire society. That's literally what automation would do. So I wouldn't have to go work a factory job to put food on the table. The factory runs itself, except for a few people who take care of the factory. And there's a great short story just came to mind, that's basically like that, where there's one guy in the planet who basically makes sure the factory that does everything for everyone works right. He's the only one that works, and everyone else just benefits, right? Everyone else just has what they need provided. But if you get to a part where society is automated so much that those needs are taken care of, right? Where it costs nearly nothing to feed and clothe and house everyone, and also to have healthcare that's available to everyone for a low price, right? What is the work that people do then? And also, so there's two parts there. What is the work that people do? Because it's not going to be the work of making things that other people can use and find value. And it's going to be kind of higher levels of work. It's going to be writing and thinking and art. I mean, it's
everyone
basically
becomes a podcaster.
Isn't that happening already? Look at you, they let just anybody do this.
Yeah.
Is that, during the Middle Ages, most people were working on getting enough food to get through the day, right? And getting their basic physiological needs met. And that's what they spent their entire life doing. And only a few people even got past that, right? And so here's where maybe society is changing, in that we might be able to fill that bottom level at such a low cost to everyone.
How far away do you think we are from that, though, realistically? Because
I mean, automation is picking up.
We're clearly not there.
No, we're not there yet. I don't have a time on it, but we're looking at automation. We're looking like
there's always going to be ditch diggers. There's always going to be
for all the bodies, for those socialist pigs who are going to kill everyone.
Gosh.
Yeah, the grave diggers. No.
Okay, first of all, I got two things to say. One, the whole pothole thing reminds me of Ron Swanson when he fills the pothole because the government can't do it. So that's the first thing.
Just fill your own potholes.
Yeah, no, but I think Kara brings up a good point, about the question about when do we get to that point. And I think farming, the farming in the 1780s in America and farming today are wildly different, right? Now, I think in the 1780s, there's like 70 or 80% of the people that lived in America were farmers. And now it's a total of like 2 million people. So less than 1% of the country farms. And yet those 2 million people produce enough food to feed every single person in the world. Like, we could end hunger with the amount of food produced in America alone. So in that sense, we're not that far removed from, not only can we produce enough food in America to feed the entire world, but we could produce it, with the way that people are using like hydroponics for crops and all these new technologies to grow crops like at a cheaper way and stuff like that. We're not that far removed from a situation where not only can the food be provided to the world, but it could be provided, I don't know, free, but at an extremely low cost.
So can I jump in here?
Yeah.
And this is where I think, like, that sounds fantastic, right? Everyone gets fed. So then the farmers look around and see everybody else is eating for free.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still working from 5 a.m. until 6 p.m. to provide food for hundreds or thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people. Why should I keep doing this if I can just go live in the city and get food delivered to me?
Well, eventually, I don't think farmers will actually be farmers. They'll be farm managers. Like, they won't
It'll be automated.
Eventually,
right?
the tractor will be able to drive itself, sort of
Mhm.
thing.
I think there are unintended consequences with that. If you've ever seen, what's the name of that documentary that's just shocking about Food Inc. I think that there's a legitimate amount of people starting to say, yeah, we need to get back to natural food and, the way God intended and that stuff. If our mindset as a culture starts to go to, oh, well, this is the wave of the future, we need to start adjusting our ways because of things that haven't even happened yet, to undo that.
Mm-hmm.
So many of these things, and part of the reason why that scares me so much, a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight are very scary propositions, because there's really no going back from that. And if the bottom of the pyramid is suddenly of by emissions, and we build our economy around that, our whole system around that,
Mm-hmm.
that would take a generation or two at least to undo. And it's going to take a generation or two to see those unintended consequences. So this is like huge stuff that I feel like is being, oh, well, it's just the wave of the future, and this is just the way that things are going. And that kind of relates to everything that's going along with the pandemic and everything that's going along with what's going on in the world. And sorry, this is maybe out of left field, but so many people are, well, China's been wearing masks for years, and why can't we start wearing masks? It's not that big a deal. It's a huge deal, because first of all, when are we using China as the gold standard? Second of all, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can't say, oh, this is the way that the world's going, let's just follow along with it. Most of us like the way that the world is now. And to preemptively make a move based on, oh, this is what experts project the world is going, it doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the most obvious thing to look at is masks, obviously, and the great mask debate and everything. But, this whole new normal thing, and when people use that language, I absolutely hate that language, because I feel like it justifies some of these scary things that are happening in the world, and it's being normalized.
Mm-hmm.
And Thanksgiving being canceled is being normalized. Oh, well, we have to do it. This is the way that the world is going. It's not my choice. And everybody acts like it's not their choice. Everybody acts like they don't have a say in the matter. Everybody acts like, well, everybody's doing it, so I might as well do it. And it really upsets me. I go, every couple days, I'll read a news article and I'll just get really angry at what I'm reading, because I worry that people are giving up. We were joking at this top of the show that we're 9 months into this pandemic and it's not going anywhere. There's no sign of it stopping. And too many people are saying, well, historically these things last 18 months, and be that as it may, we're halfway through. We've got another 9 months of what we've already done. That really worries me for people, for families, for health, for so many things, that, again, unintended consequences that are going to change the world in a negative way. And the more people keep acting like, oh, this is just the wave of the future, this is the new normal, I think a lot of terrible things can happen in the name of the new normal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of these things that are being pushed, I don't necessarily agree with. And I think they are scary, and they kind of create a cognitive dissonance in my mind, like taking the world or country I grew up in and fundamentally changing it is a terrifying prospect. But the thing that I look at on the other side is the world is changing. So how do I need to adapt within that change? And I guess how do we need to adapt as a nation within that change? The technology is getting more and more and more advanced. And so we won't be that far removed from a point where we don't need humans to build cars anymore. Like we don't need people to grow food anymore. And so how are we going to deal with that? I think is the questions that are being asked. And right now, the idea that's brought up is, well, we just give everybody food. We just make guarantee everyone has shelter or healthcare or whatever it is. And while those are an option, I don't know if they're necessarily the best option. But the question remains, right? Like, I think that's the problem, is the question still remains. Whatever we do, like, we're going to get to this point where eventually these things happen. And we need to deal with them. It's funny because I'm reading this book that my uncle sent me, and it's called The Accidental Superpower. And it's talking about how America rose to prominence and became the superpower in the world. And it's really fascinating. I'm about halfway through it. But basically, at the end of World War II, America took all the leaders of the Europe and got them into a room in Bretton Woods in Connecticut or New Hampshire, and sat them down and said, okay, Europe, France, France and England and all these other countries, not Germany, not yet. They were still technically fighting, but they basically sat them down. They said, we're going to guarantee the safety of the seas, and we're going to remove all tariffs, and you're going to have free trade across the world with us. And also, you're going to get rid of all your empires, Europe. And to England and France, and then eventually Germany and Japan, and much, much later to the Soviet Union and Russia. Those are terrifying prospects. But because America had that leadership and said, this is how things are going, because the way things have been going with you guys and your empires is killing tens of millions of people, and it's devastating the world. So now things are going to be different, and you're going to do it our way. And it's led to this era of global peace and prosperity and people being lifted out of poverty and just all these great changes, because America fundamentally shifted how the world functioned. And now the world's changing again. I think the problem is that America's not they're not that impetus anymore. They're not the ones taking the charge and like saying, here's how we can make this great, which is,
Again,
kind of America's thing. Oh yeah.
Nice.
So I think that's what makes it interesting, is that it's kind of the rest of the world is pressuring us to say, you need to change, and we're resisting that. And I think some of that resistance is right, like you're saying, Cameron. But I think if we're going to resist it, then for me personally, I need to know, well, what are we offering, as the alternative to this grand social reset that essentially the rest of the world is pushing on us. I doubt we'll get to that answer, but like
I did see.
I think that's a good thought. Yeah.
Andrew Yang, who I follow, and I find him interesting. I think for the most part, had he been a nominee for president, I probably would have been very interested in him. Even though, his policies are pretty far left, but he doesn't condescend very much, which I appreciate. But he posted something that said, Canada's constitution says peace, order, and good government. And he said, wouldn't that be nice? And it got me to thinking about a conversation I had weeks earlier or months earlier, I think, with a former student. And we kind of got into this discussion about, why can't the U.S. have healthcare? Why can't the U.S. have all these things? And I got to a point, and I think I saw it in that tweet: peace, order, and good government. Well, if that's a Commonwealth thing, right? All the British Commonwealth have that kind of in their constitutions. See, that's the ends of their government, right? That's their objective. That's their purpose, right? To have peace, order, and good government. And those are good things. I'd rather have good government than bad government. I'd rather have order than lawlessness, and I'd rather have peace than war. But see, that's not what our founding documents say. Our founding documents say that we're doing this so that we can have a more perfect union, so that we can guarantee life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so the objective of the United States is not peace and order and good government. It's life and liberty. And as long as that's our objective, I think it's a worthy and virtuous objective. As long as that's the objective, we can't knee-jerk into stripping a right to save some lives. New Zealand or Australia, just locked everything down. And, they're knocking on people's doors at their houses if they've tweeted something that they don't like. I think it was New Zealand, after their one shooting, banned all the assault rifles just like the next day. It's like, yeah, but they have a different purpose for their government than we do. And ours is to guarantee, not provide, but guarantee these particular rights and keep those from being infringed. And I think that's where, when the rest of the world looks to the United States right now, says, be a leader, change. It's like, yeah, we have a different purpose. Our purpose is to guarantee rights, not to turn around and throw out our laws so that we can prevent a disease. And it's funny because I think FDR is one of the strongest presidents we've ever had, because he's pushed through very strong legislation. He also locked up an entire race of people during World War II. And today, I mean, it's amazing what we get upset about today, but he did that to an entire population. And almost nobody made a stink about it at the time.
Yeah. And as you were talking about that, it kept popping in my head that, the original or the individual, versus the collective, and what I get out of, that Canadian thought process versus the American thought process is that it's just two totally different things. It's, strong government leading the way.
Sorry, guys.
Have a good night, buddy.
You too. Bye.
Don't call it Dad Bod History for nothing, huh?
Nope.
But yeah, it's, to summarize what you just said in comparison between the two declarations, I guess we'll call them, is strong government leading versus the individual leading. And you're right. I mean, that's the end of the game. Is where is all this stuff coming from? This second Bill of Rights, is this being provided by the government, or is this something that, as heads of the household, we are trying to scratch and claw and get the best we can for our family?
Yeah, I think, and something comes to mind just now, and maybe it's appropriate or maybe it's not, but I think it's something good to end on. And I think there's a ton more we could have with this conversation, but what is being presented in some of this Great Reset, in some of these Second Bill of Rights, and some of these new ideas, not necessarily new ideas, but it's like, hey, this pandemic is showing there is some weaknesses in our system, in our systems, right? Our system, other systems, we have some weaknesses. There's some points on which, if there's put too much stress, we can have serious issues. right? I know you've experienced that with this pandemic very personally with your work. Like that's a stress point. That's a point at which our system was not prepared to handle. And there's a lot of people that are in a much worse situation than you were.
Yeah.
But it's almost like we're being asked, listen, if you can just give up these few rights, if you can just give up these few decision points, if you can just give up some of these things, and maybe the word selfish gets thrown around. You're selfish for wanting to hold on to that or keep that. But if you can just give those things up, we can give you everything you need. Everything you need can be provided, but you got to just give these few things up. And what comes to mind, and again, I might be taking a big leap here, it might be a jump, might be inappropriate, but I think of Jesus in the desert, those 40 days of testing.
Yeah.
And there's a particular point, and as a historian, I've always kind of looked at that. He takes Jesus up onto the hilltop. He says, look at all these empires. And what eventually I realized was that what Satan showed him there was the ability to reach out and tell every empire, every person in the world right there who he was, ahead of his father's plan, right? Way ahead of schedule. But he could have done it. He could have talked to the precursors to the Aztecs or the Maya, to tribes in Southern Africa, to the Chinese Empire. Like these are things that he would have been presented with, in my mind. That's what I see. I'll give you what you really, really want. You just have to bend the knee. Hey.
I think that's beautifully said.
And the collective.
What are you willing to give up to get provided for?
Yeah.
What are you willing to give up rights-wise before you say, no, that's enough. It stops right here.
Yeah. And I think
that's different for every person.
The struggle is always collective versus individual. And there's a lot of things the collective can do really well. It does cost something to the individuals. And I think in many cases, we do that voluntarily, right? We have communities that we enter into and we give up some of our self to reap the benefits of those communities, whether it's a church community, a school community, our local city government, whatever it is. And there's some things that we retain as individuals and we feel necessary to retain. But the struggle is always between those two, collective and individual. And the more we lean toward one, the more we give up of the other. So there's a balance in there. I'd like to think of myself as an individualist, but I've watched enough of like Flying Wild Alaska and Life Below Zero. I would not make it. Right. So I do need the benefits of the collective around me in society and some of those things. I do need it and I have used it. But there's certain things I just feel I can't give up. And to give up, I would be betraying myself to do that.
Yeah. Just the conscience. So many that are going on in the world right now is I can't betray. And when people ask me about certain things, oh, well, why won't you wear a mask everywhere? Or why won't you do this? Or why won't you do that? And my answer to it is just my convictions won't allow me to do it. And it's just as simple as that, is I feel like I'm being disingenuous if I don't draw the line somewhere, because this craziness has got to stop somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that may be a good stopping point. Sound good?
Yeah, agreed. We covered a lot of ground tonight.
Yeah. So if you're one of the lone souls that made it this deep into this podcast, like, subscribe, all that stuff. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok now.
TikTok. Hey yo.
Not doing any dances yet. But reach out to us, leave a comment below and all that kind of stuff. And other than that, I'll say we'll see you back next time. Cameron?
Thanks everybody.
It's been great.
Good times.
Dad Bod History. Out.